right, there's our intro music. That means it's time for another edition of Deep Recruiting, where we're bringing you, the recruiters, and for some candidates and job seekers out there, the key skills you need to be successful in recruiting. This is what we're after. Each week, Monday at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time, we're going to go over one specific idea, one specific tactic that you can employ every day to make yourself a little bit more successful. This will be quick. Let's jump right in. So today I want to talk about what makes your recruiting call the most effective. Every recruiting call should have an objective. It could be you're extending an offer. You want to get an offer accepted. You've already had an offer accepted and you want that person to stay the course, start the job. They've been out on the job for a month. You want to make sure they're happy. But what I want to focus on is that initial qualification call. Obviously, when you're calling somebody you've never spoken before, the first thing you want to find out is, are they even open to talking to you? So that's one goal. Then, assuming they are, you want to find out, are they qualified for the opening I have? And so there has to be a bridge between that first part of the call where you're finding out if they're available, you're doing introduction, you're doing pleasantries. At the end of the call, where you're determining whether or not that candidate is somebody you are going to feel good about representing. So the first thing we have to do is we have to set standards for ourselves. At what point are we going to accept a candidate as being qualified? At what point are we going to reject a candidate for not being qualified? Personally, I've seen recruiters do two primary tactics. There's guy number one who looks at everybody as qualified, and they're looking for every reason possible to qualify a particular candidate. Me personally, I always took a different approach. I always looked for every reason a candidate wasn't qualified for a job. I would look at a resume and I'd look for justification to not call that person. If I couldn't justify not calling them, well, I didn't. If I couldn't justify not calling them, I picked up the phone, gave them a call. And my entire phone conversation was centered around, how can I get this person off the phone the fastest? And the people I couldn't justify getting off the phone, I invited in for a face-to-face meeting. My entire face-to-face meeting was always, how can I get you out of my office as quickly as possible? Because I'm a busy guy. I got things to do. The people I couldn't justify getting rid of were the people that made it through the filter. Those were the people I was excited to represent. So my standard was always, am I excited to represent this person to my client? Is this person going to make me look good? Simple as that. Now, one way to do that certainly is to have an entire script, a series of 5, 10, 15, even 20 questions you're going to grill that particular candidate on to see if they're a possible match. And sometimes, yeah, you got to do that because there's a list of specific requirements. Candidate has to have a bachelor's degree. They have to have at least 3+ years of experience. They've got to have this. They've got to have that. And you do have to kind of go through that checklist. But I want to propose to you kind of a different way to qualify your candidate. Instead of qualifying them for the job you're recruiting for, I want you to look at qualifying them. Are they good enough, period, for you to collect a fee on? Maybe not for the job you've got, but for a fee itself for perhaps a different job, a different client, a different opportunity. That's how I always looked at every single candidate. I looked at every candidate from the standpoint of, are you going to make me look good? Or are you going to make me look bad in front of my customer? That's all I really cared about. And those would end up being the candidates I represented, the ones that I genuinely felt would make me look good. So how did I do that? Yes, I had simple questions that my client would require me to ask, but let's assume they bomb it or they don't get it right, whatever it is. I had other questions I always wanted to ask. And what I always called it, my personal name for it, was pulling on the loose thread. So what I would do is just ask some simple questions up front. Why are we looking for a new opportunity? What's going on in your world? Why are we talking? What's important to you? These types of things. What have you done? What have you accomplished? Sure. Get them talking about things. And then whatever they would talk about is what I would ask my follow up questions about. So just because I understand recruiting, they're talking about, well, I would use LinkedIn for recruiting. Okay, great. Tell me more about that. How did you use LinkedIn for recruiting? How many people did you reach out to a day? Whatever they would say, I would follow up on. Well, I would reach out to 20 people a day. Why did you choose 20? How did you find your 20? How would you look at a LinkedIn profile to determine whether or not you actually wanted to reach out to that person? What were the criteria you would use to determine whether or not that person was worthy of your time? If it's a programmer, a Java program, I might ask them a technical Java question, but what I'm really interested in are what's the biggest project they worked on? What are the obstacles they ran into when they worked on that project? What did they do to overcome those obstacles? What are the resources they used? Who was their mentor? Who did they turn to for help? What books have they read? Why did they read that book? Why do they go to this person on GitHub? Why do they check out this particular website? What's in it for them? What do they value in how they code? What's important to them in how they code? What do they value in what other people code? How do they look at other people's code? What do they like about their peers and the way they code? What do they not like about their peers and the way they code? This would all tell me a great deal about that individual and whether or not I wanted to represent them. Just asking them to supply references would tell me a lot about whether or not I wanted to represent that individual. So for me, I would always have a couple of questions up front that I would ask. And then I would use those questions as prompts for the entirety of the rest of that interview as the bridge to figure out whether or not I wanted to represent somebody or not. Sometimes the interview lasted 3 minutes. Sometimes it might last an hour. It just depended on the conversation. My goal was to have a conversation with my prospect. To qualify them through the conversation was how I always approached it and how I found a very successful mechanism for recruiting. And, I got to be blunt, 8, 9 out of 10 times that person was not a fit for the job I had. But 1 or 2 of those people would be a great fit for a different job. And the only reason I figured that out is I wasn't focused on my job. I was focused on the individual sitting across from me and what they had to offer, what was the true value they brought to the table. That is where my successful career was built. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope it gives you a different way to view your candidates, a different way to recruit. For the people out there looking for a job, I hope you find a recruiter that's willing to go through this exercise with you. It's a great way for you to judge whether or not you have a qualified recruiter if your recruiter is going to go do a good job of representing you. This is Deep Recruiting. You can find us using Pound Deep Recruiting. You can find us by emailing us at deeprecruiting@gtn.com. I welcome your questions. I welcome your comments. The questions you send us, we're going to use in our live stream. Challenge me. Throw down something difficult. Give me something hard that you're stuck in and you need a way to get out. That way, a rising tide is going to lift all boats, right? This has been Deep Recruiting. This is Jim Bright with Deep Recruiting. We appreciate you tuning in, and hopefully we'll be getting this up on Apple Podcasts here very, very soon. Thanks a bunch. Have a great week recruiting, everybody, and take care. Bye-bye.